story from Not AB Ad Guy 3. Got told to by my assignment group, and that's just what I did. I'm on phone, so please ignore the formatting issues. I do a computer science degree at university. We had a group work project which is set out in 2 stages. Part A involved making an application and writing a report about it, 50-50 split. Part B, we got feedback from Part A and had to improve upon it. In total, it was 100% of a module. It is also important to note that there is a Group Contribution Report, GCR, where each student puts in how much they think each student has done. I was in a randomly selected group with 4 others. We each picked a parts of the work that we wanted to do. I was apparently the group's most confident coder, so assigned myself about half of the code, and finish up my work in about the first 3 weeks and work on other projects I have for other modules. Then soon after I finished my work, the others ask me if I can do their parts of the code too. I initially protest as I have my other coursework due, but eventually I say fine. But so long as it is noted in the GCR, they all agree. I sweat it out over the next 3 weeks or so, alongside my other coursework. I contacted my module organizer explaining that I had done half the work, and they suggested if people weren't pulling their weight to leave the group, taking my code with me, and do the report. That would mean I would need to work flat out to produce the report, and probably would mess it up. I didn't want that. The deadline was in about a week, and I ICBA. Then I got asked to do some report too, because they didn't understand how the code worked. By this point, I felt pretty used by them. Didn't really mind so long as I got the marks. All in all, I worked out that I had done the workload of 3 people. There was talk amongst the others of all writing that we each contributed 20% of the workload to make us look better as a team. I flatly refused. They exploded calling me with every name under the sun, swearing at me, telling me to I sent off my GCR with 60 for me and 10 each for the rest, and thought that was that. My module organizer then emailed me asking if I had any proof of this, as they all put me at 0% and themselves at 25%. I'd worked my ass off on this project, putting in 150 plus hours on the code and another 50 plus on the diagrams and report, all while attending lectures 20 hours a week, over 7 weeks, which if you do that maths averages at an extra 4 hours a day. On top of all my other assignments and commitments, etc., there was no way I was letting it slide. I emailed him back, linking him to the GitHub I used to share the code with the team. GitHub is a source control that shows who made changes to the code, and showed him that all the commits, version of the code, were done by me, proving that I did all of it. And thankfully, we did the whole report on Google Drive, so I could also see the history on that document and send him screenshots of all the alterations made by me, proving that I wrote approximately 20% of the report also. He added it all up and made a special exception for my group, saying he would give me most credit for the work. I think I ended up with a 65 and they all get 11 for the whole coursework Part A. They would need 69% to even pass the module. So turned out I f***ed a bit on the code, only getting about 50% of the marks with like a massive issue in it. Dumb me, for anyone interested, I didn't make a MVC structure correctly. But my report sections were near perfect. Spelling mistakes, a common thing I do, and formatting, etc. There were a few glaring mistakes from the report that they had written, but other than that, not bad. When they found out their marks, they started calling me up and emailing me and messaging me almost for about 3 hours. I was happily out at the time and didn't have my phone with me, so didn't respond. My module organizer sent an email explaining that they had lied and he had proof about it, so corrected the marks according. When I got back to my phone, I screenshot all the messages they had sent and recorded all the voicemails, including the ones they had sent previously, including multiple occasions where everyone in the group told me to and F off I did. I sent all these voicemails and screenshots to my module organizer requesting that I leave my group and understand that it is more work for me, but I'd rather not deal with that. He agreed and also escalated the messages to someone higher up. At this point, I quit the group and decided to work on Part B by myself. taking all of my code with me, removing their access to all of it. I, of course, asked my module organizer first, and they said it was fine as it was my work, and if I was no longer in their group, the others couldn't submit it. I fixed the error in the code in about 2 weeks, then did the whole report from scratch almost, and added a load about the fix, taking me about 7 weeks. I then get messages from the group to please come back. We really need you kind of stuff on the end few days of the assignment. They even offered to pay me. I screenshot it and send it to the module organizer just to let him know what is happening, and then just ignore them. I ended up submitting 2 weeks early for the deadline and got 100% on the whole Section 2, which is basically unheard at university, especially by yourself for group work. Later that day, I get an email from a plagiarism and collusion officer. Not someone you ever want to get an email from. Basically says I'm summoned to a hearing as an external body looked at both my group, me, myself and I, and my old group's coursework and thought it was very similar. I get the whole project that my group handed in and my own back as evidence so I can look and prepare my answer to their questions. I email my module organizer, ask if he supports me in this because basically they can punish all of you or one group, never nobody. He says, yes, he supports me in this. Perfect. I prepare for this meeting by going through the hundreds of commits I have made while they had access to find the one that is most similar to it. I find a perfect match, 0 differences, not even a single character, through the thousands of lines of code. So I turn up to this meeting, there is the VP of computing there, guy who could basically do whatever the hell he wants to us. My old group, when asked to present their answer as to why this has happened, go on about how they did all of it by themselves, blah blah. You get the point. This goes on for about 10 minutes. Then I am asked to present my argument. I ask if I can share my screen. VP. Yeah, okay. Puzzled. So I share it. Show all the screenshots I took as some of the people in the meeting weren't aware that we knew each other, including them basically begging for me to come back offering money to. And as if this wasn't enough to convince them, I then showed me downloading a fresh version of what they submitted and a fresh version of one of my commits on the GitHub and running it through a trusted comparison software. I narrated this to explain what I was doing just to be clear. Took a while, but came up as I knew it would, 0 differences. Everyone was stunned. One of the group members uttered, "but ... I just laughed, and was quickly asked to hang up as I was no longer involved. Turned out they had cloned one of my commits and still had a copy on their laptop when I blocked their access, not been able to fix it at all, so just submitted it and hoped for the best. One of my friends, who is friends with one from my old group, asked what grade they got, and they said that they failed the whole module as they got a 0 for the second section, giving them just 5.5% overall for the module. You need 40 to pass, and would have to retake it over the summer, costing them and everyone in my old group their placement year jobs, after all, who wants someone who failed a module so badly and who was intellectually dishonest working for them. This meant that they all lost out on being paid approximately $20,000 each for the year's work, which goes a long way for a uni student, while I happily get mine. TL, doctor, old group tried to screw me over and told me to f***, and I did, taking all of my work with me, causing them to fail the class. Edit. Thanks for the awards. Sorry it's so long. Edit 2. To everyone asking, it was on Pro Revenge it got removed quickly from there, so I thought I'd put it here instead. Edit 3. I can't spell there. Edit 4. Tried to shorten it a bit. Edit 5. Thank you to everyone for all your comments. I am sorry that I cannot respond to them all. I will try my best. Really didn't expect this to blow up. It was really a striking revenge that knocked down the incompetent and credit thief students who wanted to get marks without contributing anything to the project. OP did a wonderful job by exposing their theft, ensuring they failed the module, and he got 100%. It is one of the best examples for standing for oneself. Story from Nova Evil Capitalist. Car dealer tells me I should waste my time and go to a competing dealer because they also won't give me the price they list on their website. This is a rather long, detailed story, so if you're the impatient sort, please skip to the bottom, though note you're missing out on fun details. This took place 8 years ago when I was buying my first new car, not just a new-to-me car. I spent a good amount of time researching the options available, both in terms of other models from other manufacturers and option packages on the car in which I was most interested, so I knew exactly what I wanted coming in the door. In 2014, car dealer websites hadn't quite gotten to the level of borderline bait-and-switch trickery you see these days, so if a dealer's website said they had a particular car on the lot at a particular price, they almost certainly did. There were several in the region that matched what I was looking for, one specifically at my existing dealership. This wasn't a smaller dealership, it was one of the largest in the Northern Virginia area for this particular brand. I had had a reasonably good experience with their service department overall and figured I'd give their sales department a chance to shine. That was my first mistake. I showed up on a Wednesday after work. It was early June, so with the mercury being in the upper 90s, I was dressed in a comfortable but still very presentable combination of a polo shirt and khaki shorts. When I entered the sales side of the dealership, I could see what appeared to be all the salespeople in a conference room laughing and joking while taking scissors to the tie of one of the men present. Later, I found out that was a rite of passage after making your first sale. I waited around for a minute or two as the conference room had glass walls, and it would be impossible not to notice me as I'm not exactly a small fellow at 6 feet, 6 inches tall. When no one came out to greet me, I went up to the receptionist's desk and said, "Hi, I'm interested in model of car, and there's one in stock I'd like to see." Her response, without even looking up from her phone, was, "Okay." I stood there for another 20 seconds or so and then politely asked, "Would someone be able to show me that car?" This finally prompted her to look up from her phone. She looked me up and down, scoffed a bit, and said she'd go and get someone. I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, hoping that things would turn around. That was my second mistake. The receptionist came back with what looked like the youngest, most wet behind the ears salesperson she could find, as evidently I wasn't worth the time of the more experienced folks. I explained that I was interested in a car that their website said they had in stock and provided him with the printout, showing the stock number, price, and all other pertinent details. It took him a while to find the car on the lot, but after a brief test drive, I knew it was what I wanted, and began the sales process. I had a trade-in, which had been primarily serviced by them, and for which I already had a written offer from CarMax, so I knew how much I should receive for it. He quoted me just over half of that figure. When I pointed out that I could get several thousand more by taking it to the CarMax just up the road, and had a written offer from them for that specific amount, he went and got his sales manager, who offered to drive me there and pick me up afterwards, but that they wouldn't match what CarMax offered. I was a bit surprised that they didn't want a nice used car to sell for themselves. 6 years old, top of the line, reasonable mileage, and serviced by them specifically. But again, cut them more slack than they deserved. When we got to price, things really fell apart. He quoted me a price that was several $1,000s higher than what they displayed on their website. When I showed him the printout again, with the noticeably lower price, he looked to the sales manager for guidance. The sales manager immediately took the line that the price listed includes all available rebates and special offers, and you may not qualify for all of them. I was now frustrated and showed them printouts from the other dealers in the area that had a similar price shown, and said that if they weren't willing to honor the price listed on their website, I'd just go to the next closest dealer that had that model in stock at that price. His response sealed the deal for me. Go ahead, waste your time, and go to competing dealership. We won't hold it against you when you come back here. I told them, okay, thank you for your time. I'll go to competing dealership, and got up to leave. No one stopped me, and the receptionist said nothing as I walked past her out to the parking lot to drive to the other dealership. When I got to the competing dealership, it was already around 8 p.m., as I had spent a fair amount of time at the first dealership, and Northern Virginia traffic has never been known for being reasonable. I had a salesperson approach me immediately upon entering the dealership, and I explained, I've just come from first dealership and want to buy particular model of car. Both of you have that car in stock with the options I want. They wouldn't give it to me at the price shown on their website. If you will, I'm ready to sign on the dotted line right now. The salesperson immediately took me to his office, verified that they had the car, and confirmed that yes, the price on their website was accurate, and I could walk out the door with that price. We started the process, and when we got to the trade-in, I further explained how the other dealership tried to lowball me on the trade. He said if I could produce a written offer from CarMax for the price I mentioned, they would match it. I gave him that paperwork, and without any further discussion, he agreed they would match that, and we moved on to financing. I hadn't gotten this far with the other dealer, but I had already lined up financing through my credit union. He asked if I'd be willing to see if his F&I guy could match or beat that figure. I agreed to let him try, and he came back with a rate that was 50 basis points lower. Needless to say, I was already very happy with these people, but that definitely sealed the deal. Right as I was finishing the paperwork, the salesperson from the first dealer texted me to ask if they would give me the car at that price. I responded back that they would, and I was finishing up the paperwork at that very moment. He immediately tried to call me, then texted me saying he'd give it to me for $500 less. I responded to his text stating that I'd already signed the paperwork and he had lost the sale. Once the paperwork was complete, the exceptionally pleasant and helpful salesperson at my new dealership spent an additional half hour after the dealership had closed for the night, running me through some of the features of the car and showing me how the infotainment system worked. This was completely above and beyond what I expected, as I thought I'd just be reading the 300-page user manual to figure it out on my own. I drove home that night with my shiny new car, a very happy camper. The next day, I decided to rub a little salt in the wounds of the first dealership, so I drove there straight from the office. For context, I work in the banking industry, and at that point, it was still very much business formal dress. I showed up in my suit with my briefcase and had people falling all over themselves trying to help me, including the receptionist who clearly remembered who I was midway through me asking for the particular salesperson I dealt with the prior day. She offered me a seat and asked if I wanted some coffee while she went to get him, and I politely said, "No, thank you. I won't be here long." She, somewhat quietly, sheepishly, responded that she'd be back with that salesperson very shortly. There was a couple in the waiting area who seemed a bit displeased that they'd been waiting for a salesperson, but I got one the moment I walked in the door. No more than a minute later, the salesperson and his manager came out. The salesperson recognized me, and with a look of defeat on his face, shook my hand and asked how I was today. Before I had a chance to respond, the sales manager spoke up to introduce himself as if I hadn't spent an hour and a half with him the previous day. After I reminded him that I was there yesterday, and he had said it would be a waste of time to go the competing dealer, because they'd never give me the car I wanted at the price shown on their website, his demeanor very quickly pivoted back to the snotty, insolent person I dealt with the previous day. He proceeded to ask, "Well, did they?" with a bit of a sneer. I said nothing, but turned to the side and clicked the remote for my new car so the horn would give a few chirps. He said, "Good for you," in a rather curt tone, and walked away, leaving the poor salesperson on his own. I shook that salesperson's hand, thanked him for his time, and turned around to leave. The receptionist spoke up as I walked past her and asked in a rather chipper voice if I needed any further assistance. I politely responded that no, the other dealership had provided me exactly what I needed, and I was all set. To make things just that little bit better, as I passed the couple sitting in the waiting area, I saw them exchange looks with each other that seemed to say, "Perhaps we should go to the dealer I mentioned." I said nothing further and walked out of the building wearing the smile of a winner. TLDR car dealer treats me poorly and won't honor the price they list for a car. Tells me that I should waste my time and go to a competing dealer in the area because they also won't honor the price they list for the car, but the competing dealer does honor the price, and I get a fine new car at a very nice price. The malicious compliance was flawless. The salesperson's dismissive attitude led to an unforgettable experience. Not only did OP get a better deal elsewhere, but his returning with the new car proved the first dealership's arrogance wrong and humiliated him well. Story form sliced double. I shut down whole organization for a week. Hello, I just told a story in I Don't Work Here, Lady, and this one is kind of related to it. Kinda. Anyway, I work in very large community centre that is non-profit. We have tons of stuff, like children daycare, open college, physiotherapy for seniors and disabled people. We got 6 huge apartment buildings for senior citizens trough out the city, activities for immigrants and unemployed. We got cafeteria and a restaurant, and more. Now I love my work. I got promotion after promotion. I started an IT tech support person. I was the only IT guy in whole organization. When I started, we got like maybe 80 persons working there, including the teachers in our open college. Today, we are over 200 strong. So anyway, it's relaxed and non-toxic work environment. As I got tons of work to do as I am alone with everything that runs with ones and zeros, I have to plan my work a little different than rest of the bunch. So I have 100% flexible work times, meaning I work when I see fit. I am on salary. They pay me once a month and not hourly. The executive director approves this as I can maintain the whole organization's IT infrastructure without any downtime. I come and go as I see best for me doing my job. This worked fine for about 12 years or so. Everyone was happy and I was respected because not only I got the job done, but my job did not cause any downtime on IT at all. Only downtime was hour or less if someone's workstation broke down, etc. I always had spared ready to go. I also was 24/7 on call and went to the office in middle of my vacations if needed, and I was able to go. I worked on weekends and sometimes nights on work week just to get things done, so there is no downtime at office hours. That time in my career, we had pretty massive amount of servers. 8 server machines just for Microsoft stuff, 4 Linux servers and couple BSDs for open college. I had a maintains routine divided to small maintenance that I did after office hours and large maintenance that I did after office hours and continued through the night and the huge ones that needed me to live at the office over the weekend. And as there was no thing as overtime, we had agreement that whenever I had to work more than 8 hours, I would get paid leave instantly on next day. So if I came work at 8 in the Monday, stayed until everyone left and then started the smaller maintenance that would usually take like 2 to 3 hours max, I would then come 2 to 3 hours later to work next day. And if it took long enough, I could take the whole next day off. I always informed the whole organization that maintenance was due and I would deal with it and take X amount of leave next day. No problems with anyone. Business as usual until we hire a new project manager. Middle-aged lady that has most piercing blue eyes that drill into our soul and suck all the joy and will to live out of you. And she was a corporate manager. It was her first time working in non-profit org, so she was super shocked how relaxed our office was. There were complaints about everything that I don't want to list here because only one is relevant. Working times. I did not get how she was able to boss around out frigging director when she was only a project manager. I mean, WTF, I was at that time already a systems administrator. But anyway, soon came the time for large maintenance. Some updates for accounting software and some smaller things to open college end. I put a notice to our org's email list like always and state that large updates are going in starting this evening and ending before tomorrow morning, and that I would not be in office next day. Email me or call if any problems. I never gave any time estimates because there was always a chance that they won't hold. If something goes wrong with updates of other stuff, it's my ass who has to fix it anyway, and then it's God know how many hours it takes. So evening comes, everybody goes home, and I wait till last one log out from their workstation and go to work. Routine stuff, some updates, weird database conversion that has to be done every time our accounting or wages software gets an update. It takes time, but only like 6 hours or so as it's only the accounting database. I finish my stuff and head home. Next morning, I wake up around 7 a.m., make some coffee, and head to my gaming computer and think, all day, nothing but Eve Online. At around maybe 9 something, my work phone rings. I answer, and it is the project manager. I'll just call her PMS from now. PMS yells to me on the phone. Something like this. Don't remember actual words. PMS. Where the hell are you? Me. At home. It's my day off. PMS. Oh, well, we have a situation here. I need you here now. Me. Okay, I'll be there in 15 minutes. I still lived pretty close to my work. On my way, I thought, did I f up something last night? Can't be. I tested everything, and it would have been accounting calling me or secretary if it was about updates at Open College End. Well, whatever, I'll see then. I rush to office and go straight to project manager's office. Me. Hey, what's up? MS. My printer is out of toner. Get me a new one. Me. Out of toner? This the situation? There are toners on a shelf at storage at first floor. All desktop printers are the same and use same toner. So why did you not get it yourself? All this was explained to you a week ago. PMS. I am not going to change any toners, boy. Do your job. Me. Okay, whatever. And head to storage to get new toner. We have a policy that all employers deal with their own desktop printers. Like, add papers to them and change the toner, because it is as easy to putting your effing shoes on. And it takes these trivial tasks away from me, who already is overworked and underpaid. I got back and changed the toner. Then I head back home. She actually stopped her whining for a while, and I thought all was good. But after a couple more maintenance days and night, she called to administrative meeting. So there were me, our new wages clerk, who also was HR manager, director, office manager, and PMS. PMS starts the meeting. Again, something like this, as I don't remember the actual words. PMS. I wanted to talk about work times and how OP has been slacking and taking leave on his own accord. I thought that in this community, we all share the same rules, do we not? Me? Sorry, but as the same rules do apply to all, work times don't. We do different kind of work here, so same exact work times just won't work. PMS. You have been at home when people here have problems with their computer? Me? Yes, and they call me if there is a problem, and 99.9% of time we get it sorted out by phone. PMS. But your home is not your workplace. Your office is. Me? Yes, but as I have to work late, and even nights sometimes here, I take the paid leave ASAP, like we have agreed here. PMS? Well, all work should be done at normal office hours. Why do you even have to work at nights or weekends? Me. Because no one here wants any downtime on theirs work. Just to clarify, there were at this point maybe 120 people strong. At least 80 of those used workstations or laptops for their work. Even the damn fitness instructors. Everything was at this point digital and ran ones and zeros. Physicist meets a client, they do their stuff, and then physicists does the mandatory report on computer. They make all the plans for clients on computer. Kiddie daycare uses computers daily to be in contact with parents, etc. Everything is running by computers now. PMS. Nonsense. You can do your job at office hours like the rest of us. I look at director as I know HR and office manager don't give a flip about this. And for some reason, director says to me, Director, yeah, PMS and I have been talking about this issue for a few times now with whole staff. And from now on, our old agreement is no longer valid. You have to do all your work at office hours. Many people don't like that you can take paid leave. Me. Are you sure? Like 110% sure about this. All my work. Server and network maintenance too. At office hours? Can we make new written agreement on this like we did on my open hours? Director? Yes. Come by at evening before we close the office for today. I'll have the agreement ready by then. Me. Okay, dokie. And leave do continue whatever I was doing before this crap is about to hit the fan meeting. As you can guess what is about to happen. I mean, there was zero toxicity at our work. Everyone was happy and then, one corporate goblin just has to sum and create this tension. Oh well, they are about to learn their lesson. I go to see director later at evening and we sign the agreement about my new work times. I check the agreement and tell director that he forgot something. There is no mention about the time frame I need to inform whole staff when maintenance is about to happen, only that I have to do all my work at office hours. From 8:15 to 15:30 also, as I am on salary. Overtime is not allowed unless we have an agreement on it. And whoopsie, old agreement that stated my overtime hours would be paid leave hour by hour, new agreement had nothing about overtime. So absolutely no overtime hours. Period. But I did not mention this to him. He just shrugs his shoulders and says, "Just send them email in the morning if you are about to do it that day." Alrighty then. Will do. I'll just start to my waiting game. I love my work and all the people here, but I'm about to make myself most hated man here, at least for a while. Couple of weeks go by. I do few small maintenance jobs here and there, and downtime is only from 1 hour to 2, and I usually do it at lunchtime so everyone get as little downtime possible. Because I am waiting for the huge one. And patience of rewarded. In a few months, accounting and wages are getting huge updates. I mean, this is the stuff that usually means that I stay whole weekend at office sleeping on the floor with sleeping bag for those couple of hours I can. I still think that, should I just, to go and tell the director that we are about to hit the big one? Nope, I'm not. I also had saved some smaller updates just for this occasion. I have never felt so evil in my life. So the day comes and I go to office 8:15 sharp and send the message to whole organisation. Good morning, it's XX4X20 and today is again maintenance day. Prepare for some downtime. This maintenance concerns whole organisations as I have to update all the servers and some routers too. There is also a huge update on financial software and it is critical and has to be done. I will start operation at 11 o'clock as usual. Thank you for your understanding. Sincerely. OP. Remember that I never have told anyone any estimates how long maintenance will take. Heh. I do my other stuff and then ding, it's 11 o'clock. Time to start. Phase 1. First, I kick every employee out from network. Easy. I got a script for that. Phase 2. Then I hit OS updates on every server and go get some coffee. Now, everyone got kicked out from network so they can't access anything at network. File server is offline. Print server, offline. Database servers, offline. They can't even use photocopier because you have to log to AD, Active Directory, to use it with RDIF card. They still have access to their desktop, and they can use desktop applications, but as company policy, all data is stored to file servers as no one is allowed to save any files on their laptops and workstations. Also, they can't use internet at all because every server is now downloading updates from internet. And I made sure every Linux and Unix box downloads everything possible. My phone starts to ring. Me. This is IT services. How can I help? Screaming. Me. Yeah, it's a big maintenance today. I did send email this morning about it. No, I don't know how long it's going to take. All day at least. Maybe. We see. Click on the other end. 12 o'clock. People are starting to return from lunch. Whole network is still down and stays down. 1300-ish. I start to get phone calls about how long it's going to take. Some people come to my office when they can't reach me by phone. I just tell that estimated time is unknown on these big updates. Should not take more than day or two. Day or two. This is what stirred the whole place. It was like a beehive all of a sudden. People came to me screaming and yelling. Why you do this to us? Why? Cancel the updates now. I need to work. Stop. I just shrugged my shoulders. Sorry. Can't do anything about it. It's impossible to cancel or stop once it is put into motion. Just hang on. Even director came to see me and was first angry and then little confused. I told that this is what maintenance is. It is what it is and nothing will change it. At least not this instant. Everyone just has to suck it up and wait till it's done. I'm just doing my job here. So I just read some IT magazines and had too much coffee for the rest of the day as I was waiting for the servers to update. Then 15:30 came and I went home. Some people were still sitting at their offices waiting and looked me with the most questionable faces asking where I am going. Home, see you tomorrow. Next day. I go check the servers at the morning. Almost done all of them. Unix and Linux are peachy. I still have to reboot all the Windows servers. I do that. I could just boot them all at once, but I feel more evil by the minute, and I just boot them one at a time, waiting for server to fully boot, me log in and check that updates are okay before moving to next one. And of course, after every server, I pull my own laptop and make a maintenance report in detail. No one reads these reports, but office managers demand them anyway. They go straight to archive and into recycle bin year later. After I have done with servers, clock is around almost 1400, and I haven't had my lunch yet, so I go and have a lunch. I come back 15:10 and start to plan next day. I need to install updates for financial applications, and I want to do checklist that all goes smoothly. Did not complete my list and plan, so it's 15:30 again, and I'm going home. Did I mention that it's now Thursday? I started my maintenance at Tuesday. I finish my checklist and plan for financial software updates early. I start dropping updates one by one before lunchtime. I could drop them all at once, but I just want to go by the book and follow my checklist. It's, by the way, recommended by this software supplier that updates are installed one by one. All goes smooth, and I put the databases to do their weird conversion. As I am not a total man part, I drop rest of smaller updates on other server-side programs while I wait for the database thingy to complete. Well, as usual, it takes forever, so I head back home when clock hits 15:30. Friday. I have been only person in our 120-person company working since 11 a.m. last Tuesday. Everyone is so pissed. They have to come to office and do nothing. Some are doing cleaning operations to their desk. Some are tidying paper archives, etc. Most are just sipping coffee and reading magazines. Internet has been fine since Wednesday, but I don't think anyone has noticed. LOL. I feel sorry for physicists who have to use pen and paper to all clients and then liters sort everything on their computers. Restaurant and cafeteria are fine, as I did not mess with cashier systems at all. Friday morning and I get all okay from database conversion. Okay, let's see. Okay. I think I can now begin starting the services on servers. One by one, of course. I take my sweet time. Using every break I am entitled to and have full-length lunch break. Finally, 1500 hours sharp, I send an email to whole org that maintenance is now done, and you can now re-log in to get access to network. Thank you for your patience. Next estimated huge maintenance is about in 3 or 4 months. Director, office manager, accountant, and wages clerk had been at home most of the week. I think I was them at Wednesday morning, but not after that. Project manager was pissed at Wednesday too, but left me alone as I explained that if I have to go to some meetings with every branch about this downtime issue, downtime would only get longer as I would not be actively working on it. Next week we had new administration meeting and my old open to work times agreement with overtime leave was active again. I got in written. No one ever complained about my paid overtime free time ever again. And I was not concerned about getting fired, as in my country, firing employee is hard. It is super hard to get rid of someone. And as I had written agreement about work times and my work contract clearly stated what I do at my work, there was no way they could have any case of sacking my temporally evil ass. But in the end, all was good. Couple of weeks and everyone is happy to work again, with no downtime at all. Update. The villain. PMS was chill for the rest of her career. I even visited her family house and fixed their home computer and installed new printer and Wi-Fi for them. She retired from work few years ago. She was actually sorry about what happened and took all the blame. There have been few longer downtimes, but those were always hardware failures. When servers go boo-boo, there is no spare ones to put up in an hour. But thanks to virtualizations and a lot cheaper hardware, I'm prepared to that too now. Update of update. I was away for a weekend with no internet. I like to take few days off the grid time to time when possible to reboot my brain. But anyway, I bet many are wondering how PMS was able to boss my boss around. Answer is pretty simple, but first I have to explain how the work culture works in our non-profit and most likely at any other similar work environments as well in my country. I am an executive administrator. Sound like top-notch position, right? I must have plenty of power, right? Answer is yes and no. I have clients I work for. Who are these clients? Well, every single employee at my organization. I serve them, I work for them. I don't work for some faceless stakeholder or CEO who just wants to get his bank account fatter. I work for my clients. How about our other executives, like managers and our high honcho, the director? Same thing. Their job is to make sure that everyone can do their job and are happy to do it. I know it must sound weird if you are from stiff corporate world, but this is how it basically works here. If employee is pissed about something, the managers is going to hear and have to deal with the issue. The chain of command is short and simple. We only have a branch manager who is usually an employee who is most skilled and experienced. He does the manager stuff along the normal work on his field. Next step is executives. No middle managers. We even don't have office manager anymore. Of course, this does not mean that employees can do whatever they want. Number. If they start to slack and won't do their job, manager or director will take matters and see that they get back in line. But also, if employee has complaints, concerns, or just want to change things, they can freely go straight to director about it, and they have a right go there, pissed AF if they feel the issue needs. Only reason I was given the executive title was because director wanted to wash his hand from responsibility. If employee it's his, she or hers boss who takes the heat usually. And with GDPR, director really wanted to push all heat to my lap. Anyway, this leads to an environment where stuff gets done. Even it sounds the opposite. You could say that we are all equal here. No one is bossing around anyone because they have need to show their power, and then again, everyone is bossing everyone if they need to. Also, I'm not a native English person. I think I got my English skill good enough for everyday communication, but I might make mistakes or express things weirdly. And also, when I or anyone writes these stories, writing them without own expression might make them sound more dramatic than they actually are. Like I did make work for other employees hard and shut down the administration for a week, but that happens to some companies without any intention to. Sometimes crap just hits the fan. Happened to me a few times too, like power outage that took so long that backup battery power ran out and whole server room lost power in the middle of my vacation. Once our old server room flooded during spring storm. That was fun, the longest downtime in our org, 2 weeks. But thanks to all for reading. Also, thank you for the rewards. Never thought my stories would get this much attention. Just phoo. The malicious compliance was more than perfect. OP taught a bitter but necessary lesson to the manager who didn't understand the importance of leaving some tasks to those who knew it. Some managers and people on executive positions pretend to be master of all things, but in reality, they are jacks of all trades, but master of none. And such people always mess up things. Story from Eatonars. Don't use anything except Windows? Sure, have it your way. Before I start, let me just point out that this is not a Windows versus topic. Some 6 years ago, I worked in a small IT services shop that had an extremely liberal BYOD policy. You could use anything you wanted as long as it got the job done and does not introduce any problems into the client's network or infrastructure. Sounds fair enough. As I have been using Linux for almost 2 decades, and most of my job is centered sending emails or traveling to the client's offices to diagnose any problems, I figured a Linux machine would not compromise my workflow much. Most of those devices are network appliances which are managed either by command line or a web-based GUI. And if the device in question was a standard server running Windows, I could RDP into it using X-FreeRDP. Nothing that specifically required Windows. Now mind you, desktop Linux has its own fair share of shits and problems that Windows users will never ever encounter, even by today's, yes, in 2021, standards. Teething and long-standing problems like laptops failing to resume after suspend, mysterious hardware issues caused by the kernel drivers, the Linux sound system and graphics system failing to properly switch over after the laptop has been connected to an external display or projector, X suddenly throwing a fit and deciding it doesn't want to start up the desktop GUI, and on and on. It's one thing when these problems happen at home, but it's a totally different level of pissed off and frustration while they happen while out at work. Naturally, my clients didn't appreciate me taking longer than usual to address their issues when Linux decides to act up. But since I generally manage to, eventually, resolve their problems, they tend to close one eye as a professional courtesy. Besides, it also meant that they could seek me out for free advice on certain issues that involved their Linux servers, in exchange for their silence on my laptop's mishaps. My manager thought differently though. To him, it is an embarrassment for a support staff's laptop to be running into all kinds of problems while at a client's premises. Finally, after one too many mishaps, he chewed me out big time. Manager. After a presentation where my laptop decided to pull a Murphy and started flashing a nice mess of colors and lines over the projector in the middle of the session, most XOR graphics drivers were and are still a complete joke today. How many times has this been? Me? I'm sorry, sir. Manager. Don't give me that. From now on, you will use only Windows in your laptop. Do I make myself clear on this? Now, in all fairness, I was already considering a switch to Windows 8. Windows 10 was not released yet for my work laptop because of all the little paper cuts that I had to put up with on Linux. Habit, and because I'm used to it, has no influence on the matter when work is concerned. But at the same time, I was petty enough that I felt the urge to put up some form of token resistance, if only just even the score, so to speak. Regardless, I took out the hard disk containing Linux from my laptop, installed a new hard disk in its place, and performed a clean installation of Windows 8. And life was so much better. Still, I kept the old hard disk in a portable case in my bag at all times with a set of screwdrivers, should there ever be any need for it. One fine day, I followed my manager to another client's site to inspect some networking issues. The client was running a network test appliance in their lab network. This tester generates garbage but proper network traffic to a defined destination IP address, and they were wondering why the destination was only receiving less than 1% of the garbage they were expecting to see. Now, I am way out of my league here. I have no formal training or certifications in networking outside of my own experiences and self-study, and informed the client as such, but they weren't bothered. They assured me that they just wanted to exhaust all possibilities as to why the destination node wasn't getting the garbage they were supposed to see, and it would be a learning experience for all the people involved, including themselves. With that assurance in mind, I had them lead me to the destination node, which was a workstation running on Windows 7 with Wireshark to perform a packet capture of all incoming traffic. First alarm bell starts going off. Before I could even say anything, my manager cut in and said that it's probably because they were using Windows 7 for the destination node, and that my laptop with Windows 8 may produce better results. I swear, I had to fight the urge to roll my eyes on hearing this. And when I tried to explain to him how unlikely a newer version of Windows would even solve anything, he brushed it off, saying that we should try everything. Well, if he wants to make a fool of himself, I'm game. Cue the MC. For the 2 hours, he kept giving me all manner of instructions and suggestions which naturally did not work. Changing the MTU size, changing the NIC settings, applying certain Windows updates, etc., and I had no desire to oppose him in making a fool of himself. Finally, when he was about to call it quits as the client's working hours were about to end, I asked the client if they could tell me a little more about the traffic that was being generated by the network tester. Oh, all kinds of traffic. GRE, MPLS, VLAN, and stacked VLANs, fiber channel, a lot of types actually. Second alarm bell starts going off. For those who are not familiar, hardware network drivers in Windows are usually end-user drivers supplied by the vendors of the NIC and submitted to Microsoft for integration purely as a convenience. That is, they are drivers that are designed to be used for nothing more than standard TCP/IP and UDP/IP communication over Ethernet. Any frame or packet that is not recognized by the driver gets dropped silently. No warning, no alert. Just dropped. Such drivers are perfect for normal networking, but are almost completely useless for diagnosing enterprise network issues where VLANs, tunnels, and other protocols are commonplace. On the other hand, a NIC driver in Linux usually supports a much more comprehensive network stack and thus has a drastically higher chance in seeing and recording different kinds of network traffic than Windows during a packet capture. So I was fairly certain at this point that there was nothing wrong with their network tester or their lab network at all. It was just the NIC driver in Windows doing exactly what it was supposed to do: drop any traffic it does not recognize, and asked the client if they could kindly stay back for just about 30 minutes after their working hours for me to try one last option. They agreed, so I took the old Linux hard disk out from my bag and proceeded to do a hard disk swap on my laptop. In the meantime, my manager was grumbling non-stop about me wasting everybody's time and being stubborn and refusing to use Windows as instructed. With the old Linux hard disk installed, I booted up into my old installation, connected the laptop to the network tester, and started T-Shark. Almost immediately, everyone could see my laptop's gigabit port being flooded with traffic, and the packet count was easily more than 30 times what was observed in Windows. Finally, for the coup de grace, I cut the capture and opened the PCA PNG file in Wireshark, which proudly displayed traffic from all the various network protocols previously mentioned. Of course, I also informed the client that there was nothing wrong with their workstation, with Windows, or with the network tester. They just needed to find a modified or debug driver that could recognize such traffic, or otherwise set up a temporary Linux node for their packet capture requirements. On the other hand, my manager was rather poked at me for what he claims was wasting 2 hours of everybody's time, when I already knew what the problem was right from the start, but refused to share it with the others until now. So it was extremely gratifying when the client stepped in and put my manager in his place by pointing out that 1, he never bothered to ask about the traffic type 2. He assumed that it was a Windows configuration issue, and 3, he never thought to ask me what I thought might be the cause. My manager never spoke to me again after that incident, outside of a half-hearted attempt to retain me when I finally resigned a year later. Update 1. To make it clear, I am not blaming my manager in any way when he made me use Windows, because I would have already done so myself after having to deal with all the random issues encountered while on the job. I just did not take very kindly to the "you will use only Windows" portion of his orders. The malicious compliance was perfectly executed. Despite being forced to use Windows, OP subtly let my manager lead himself into making flawed decisions. The best part was when OP provided the solution, leaving his manager embarrassed and the client impressed. Story from Bobby Bumblebee. Welcome to the unending notebook emporium. When I was a student, I earned some extra money by working in a stationery shop in a university town. I only worked at weekends, and since there were no deliveries or post-lecture rushes, we usually had 3 of us on duty. At first, it was me, Electron, a physics student with little time for humans, and Josh, the weekend manager. Josh was a surfer dude, always really relaxed, knew that most of the job was and freely told us that the only thing he liked was chatting with us and the customers. We developed a great group of repeat customers who liked the store being quieter and being able to talk to us about whatever problem they had. On that basis, Josh had agreed a policy whereby the weekday team did all the scheduled tasks when there were more staff on duty. But on weekends, all we did was filling empty shelves and sales. Unfortunately, Josh's main job as a water sports instructor was really taking off, and his days of selling paperclips were over. Neither I nor Electron had any interest in being responsible for keys, cash balancing, and explaining to sketchy folk why we'd stopped selling those little resealable plastic bags, so we didn't inquire about the weekend manager job, and we weren't asked either. Apparently, a weekday worker, Susan, wanted the hours. I liked Susan. She often took weekend shifts when one of us was out of town, and she blended in well with our team. But a storm was brewing. The owner had decided that weekend manager was a pointless job title and that an experienced salesperson could handle the weekend crew. So when Susan was offered the opportunity to run the weekend team, it was not on the management pay scale. It was with a $1 per hour supplement. I genuinely did feel sorry for her. Neither me nor Electron would have taken on the responsibility for $8 more per shift. She negotiated him up to $1.50 per hour, but most importantly for her, agreed that though contractually she'd be a salesperson, at weekends she must be referred to as manager. I know because she spent the first month drilling this point home, and she printed out a special badge that said manager. Then got upset when the store's assistant manager, Alice, told her she wasn't allowed to wear it on weekdays. This created a rift that Alice never forgot. Alice told us, when covering one weekend, that Susan had also promised everyone that she would whip the weekend team into shape, and that Josh had allowed us to become lazy. Alice thought the whole thing was hilarious, and said that it was pointless anyway. The owner had far bigger priorities than this store, and as long as we were ticking over a profit, he really couldn't care less about the sales volumes from one week to the next or who worked what shift. To get Susan out of his hair, he'd agreed that if she boosted sales in her first 2 months, she'd get a reward. And wouldn't you know, in the first 2 months, which happened to be a new academic year, sales were indeed boosted. She got a $25 gift voucher for another store he owned, and she told Electron and me that it was a clear example of how hard work pays off. We simply needed to apply ourselves and follow her instructions. One Sunday, I was talking to a student who wanted to buy a USB stick for their university work. I was talking about how to back up your data, and that a single USB stick might not be sufficient. Electron was explaining something that I didn't understand to someone who I also could not understand. Susan emerged from the small office at the back of the store, where she had started to spend most of her time working on the system. It was very unclear what the system did or why it had worked so effortlessly during Josh's tenure and now required constant babysitting, but her time with the system was unavoidable and critical to our success. "This shelf isn't full," she said to the open floor. I turned around and she was pointing at a shelf of notebooks. The owner had struck a killer deal on multiple pallets of garishly colored notebooks, and now we had thousands of them in the stockroom. The weekday team had put about 100 of them onto a shelf, but as they were cheap and selling quickly, a fairly noticeable gap had developed. Normally, I'd grab some when I happened to go into the stockroom for something else, but that hadn't happened in a while. I went back to talking to the customer, but then she grabbed my shoulder and jerked it back. "Bobby Bumblebee," she said. "When I ask a question, I expect a response." The young guy I was talking to looked horrified and started to back away. "Are you buying that?" she asked him, pointing at the USB stick in his hands. He shook his head, muttered something apologetically, and put it back on the shelf before rushing out of the shop. "Another time waster," she said to me. "No more wasting time on chat. You're either at the register selling or you're filling shelves. We've got plenty of notebooks in the stockroom, and there's no excuse for empty shelves. I expect every space filled." She turned and marched back to the little office. She looked over at Electron and pointed at him. "That goes for you too, Electron." He looked back at her with a look of total confusion, but he usually did so. It didn't stand out. Then, as she slammed the office door behind her, a light bulb went off in my head. "Electron," I said, "did you hear her say every space?" He nodded and started to smile. He apologized to his customer for no longer being permitted to talk to them, and we started a Herculean tag team effort in the stockroom. I brought out the first batch on the trolley and filled the notebook shelf. It looked pretty good. We were waiting for a shipment of printer paper, so there was a big gap in that section. Not anymore. I stacked those notebooks a yard high. I thought Susan might hear the noise and come out, but she was far too busy. Electron spent some time manning the register, but mostly we were filling shelves. Until eventually, we had filled the shelves. It looked like a kid had eaten a pack of highlighters and spewed across the entire store. I realized, though, that she'd said every space, not every shelf. I created a new tower near to the office door. It was a majestic sight, almost 6 feet high in the center. Electron crowned it with a roll of sparkly glitter tape. To me, it was my Washington monument. It was at this point that I heard it. What the hell? See, the one thing I knew that no one else did was that Alice was coming in at the end of the day to collect some paperwork. "Welcome to the unending notebook emporium," I said. I then told Alice how we had been berated earlier in the day and that we were now following Susan's strict instructions. Thankfully, Alice thought this was hilarious. She did ask, though, how Susan had failed to notice what we were doing. "She's been working on the system for the last 3 hours," I explained. Alice went up to the door, but rather than knocking on it, she just flung it open. Susan had been sitting on the office chair with her feet on the desk reading a novel, but had jolted herself so violently that the chair had shot out from behind her, and she was now rolling around on the floor. Alice closed the shop, told Electron and me that she'd get things straightened out and we should report as usual the following weekend. I wish I could say that Susan was fired and that Alice had taken over weekend management, but for some reason, Alice and the store manager decided to give her a second chance. Susan did have to stay late to move all of the notebooks spread across random shelves to my notebook tower, though I must say with less architectural flair than I had done. It still stood, although slightly diminished, a week later when I came back for my next shift. I've no idea what was said to Susan after the store closed, but she never wore the badge or shouted again. She also spent a lot more time on the floor and started to give us extremely clear instructions with absolutely no ambiguity. This was a great source of amusement for Electron, who occasionally played up to it. My personal favorite being when he asked if selling as much printer ink as possible meant he should lower the price to 1 cent. A few months later, both Electron and I finished our degrees and left. Neither of us worked in retail again. Electron went on to gain a PhD in physics, and we are still in touch, but I still have no idea what he is talking about or what he does for a living. Alice later took over as the store manager, and Susan, as far as I can make out, left a couple of years after me and now works as the assistant manager of a nearby supermarket. I like to think that she treats people better now, but who knows? At the very least, I hope that every time she sees a notebook, she remembers the day she spawned the unending notebook emporium. TLDR. New manager slacks off, tells us to work harder, and learns that when you push people too far, instead of working as you hoped they would, they build wonderful architectural marvels. The story is very interesting generally, but there is nothing in it that makes it a malicious compliance. Whatever, OP learned a passive-aggressive lesson in leadership. Story: Punk Tyrannosaurus. Fire me because I did my job? Okay, hope you don't need all of these supplies. I love taking photos of people, to the point that I have 2 resumes for applying for jobs, and one of them is specifically for photography work. So I was psyched when I got a job in a photo studio. It was a chain and it wasn't like high-quality work, but it was still awesome. I took a lot of photos of very cute babies in particular. Well, the company had a 3-strike policy. Once there were 3 issues with you, you were gone. They made you sign off on every single one of the reports. It didn't matter how much later it was that you got your next strike. They never went away. Okay. Doesn't seem like a great business model, but okay. And being fair, I did get 2 strikes which were very reasonable. One day, I missed work because I forgot to set an alarm. It was a super irregular schedule and it wasn't always easy to keep track of. Mea culpa. The next strike happened because I scheduled a photo shoot for before the beginning of a shift accidentally. The program was supposed to only show you times that an employee would be available for doing photo shoots, and they changed our hours with very little warning, so the photo shoot that I had scheduled the week before that would have been within our hours was no longer. I felt super bad for the mom and daughter who came in early for their photos and helped them sort everything out with a free photo redemption in apology. I still got my second strike for that. Now, the last strike, I actually got two on the same day. Around Christmas, our store goes nuts. We have to have twice as many people working in order to keep everything in order. During that, I was training a new employee and helping with her photo shoots and my own and running cash and taking passport photos and teaching her the rules for them and it was a nightmare. What made it worse was that one customer submitted 2 complaints that day about me. See, this customer felt I was pushing her to buy photos. Literally, all this company cares about is pushing the photo packages, and I was instructed relentlessly to do it more, and with more energy, because I didn't make enough people feel they had to have them. South great. I convinced a customer to spend money instead of just giving them free things and not getting $1 from them, like the company was always yelling at me to do. And I got a complaint for that? Great. And then the other complaint was even more ludicrous. The customer felt I was being too bossy with the other photographer. The one that I was training, the one that didn't know how to do the job yet, so I had to tell her how to do things. Apparently I deserved to be fired for telling her how to do things. I was heartbroken. It's been a few years now, so I've gotten over it, but I was so happy working as a photographer. But here's where the malicious compliance finally kicks in. See, by my nature, I end up doing a lot of work that isn't actually my job because I want to help. I enjoy feeling useful, but they're firing me because they don't want me to sell things or train people like they had told me to do. So for the last 2 weeks of my job, I stopped counting all of the money for deposits. That was the manager's job, even though she hadn't done it in half a year since making me do it. This meant she had to come in on days that she didn't work just to do the deposit. I stopped actively recruiting customers, which is what you're supposed to do in your downtime. Cold call previous customers and prowl around the attached mall for people you can convince to get photos. The best tactic was always to find people with new young ones. Tell them how beautiful their baby is. Offer them a free print of one of the photos after a shoot. Almost no one passes that up because then they have a wonderful photo to hold on to. I didn't feel guilty doing it because it genuinely makes people happy. I stopped taking meticulous notes of every interaction that was worth following up on. I used to make a note for the next shift about how X customer had seemed interested, but was unconvinced, and that a simple reminder of the offer would probably be enough to get them to buy. Or I would make a note about someone who forgot their passport photos and whether or not they had paid already. And then on my last day, the truest malicious compliance happened. They wanted me gone. Okay. I took my name tag and packed it away. I went into the photo studio and grabbed the kids' toys I had brought in to help get young ones to cooperate. Babies don't really understand a stranger saying smile for the camera, but if you shake a rattle at them and make silly faces, they're very good at smiling for that. I cleaned up all of the things I had laid out neatly for easy preparation and put them back in storage. I cleaned up the counters to get rid of all of the notes and passport photos that weren't claimed that day, because that was what we were technically supposed to do. And then came the real part that this title refers to. Over my 9 months working there, a number of issues had come up with the things we worked with. For the passport photos, we needed a paper trimmer to slice off the edges quickly and neatly. We had one when I started, and then it broke. I brought in a replacement. It got broken too. Still, we needed one, so I brought in another replacement. We also had gotten our stapler stolen. No worries. I had one at home we could use. And the keys to the storage, the extra receipt paper, the passport paper, where we keep the deposits, where we keep our paper files, they were tiny. And the color of them was so bland that throughout the course of the day, they would get lost easily 30 times. I had bought a large blue fluffy keychain to attach to it with permission from the boss. Never lost the keys again. Not one of us. We had also had a sign when I started there which we could pop out, which said, "I'm in a photo shoot, Please be patient. I'll be with you in a moment. Or something along those lines, because there was often only one employee at a time and they had to do the photo shoots and all of the passport photo drop-ins. Well, my boss accidentally dumped her coffee on that sign after she tripped one day. So I went out of the way to get a new one printed, bought a plastic sleeve for it, and set it up with a cardboard backing so it wouldn't break or get ruined. It was better than the old one. So, of course, when I left, I took my sign, my keychains, my paper trimmer, my stapler, my toys, and, notably, my shutter button. See, the camera had a shutter button attached that would allow you to move about while snapping photos. Again, helped with little ones because they don't understand directions, so you have to be able to physically draw their attention somewhere. This cord had gotten frayed and not replaced. It shocked me nasty enough to leave a burn, so I took it off the camera and brought my own in. I got a call the next day asking me how dare I steal the company's supplies. I calmly replied that I had just taken back the items that belonged to me, and that they could keep the broken paper trimmer that I had brought in. I even left them a pair of scissors I brought for a backup when the first paper cutter broke. I even brought them a box of paper clips for using since they didn't have a stapler anymore. The store closed down not 2 months later. Crazy how when you fire your hardest worker over things that you told them to do, and one missed shift, mea culpa, other employees are less than enthused about the chance of the same thing happening. And no one else worked nearly as hard to keep everything in the black as I did. Not to say there's anything wrong with that. I liked everyone except the manager, since it was only 2 other employees, and they did their work well and treated me nicely. They just had a better sense of doing what they were paid for and nothing else. And for reference, the employee who the customer felt I was treating badly looked at our manager like she was insane and asked when I had done that, because she knew for a fact that the only time I raised my voice at either herself or the only other employee was because it was too loud for them to hear me otherwise. She apologized to me, said that she was worried it was her fault because she had been a little nervous that day because she was dealing with other things and was worried that the customer had gotten the wrong impression because of that. Said employee then went on to have her own gallery show, leaving shortly after I was fired. Edit. People have raised questions about why I worked 2 weeks after being fired. Simply enough, there was no one to cover my shifts. One employee was in China celebrating New Year's with her grandparents, one was working on her own photos which became her gallery show, and the manager would be very over 4th hours if she worked my shifts too. And I needed the money and wanted to say goodbye to some of the kids and parents who I took photos of every month. Relatively common, a lot of them wanted photos of their babies as they grew and changed. Though this has reminded me of one sweet thing they told me, so thanks for questioning all. One of the families said they wouldn't be rebooking next month then because no one else had gotten their kid to take such nice photos. It felt awesome. It's been 6 years, so I had forgotten about that. Edit 2. Just another torturous tidbit about this company. They kept every studio temperature the same as corporate. Corporate was in a very different climate area. It was almost always either meltingly hot all summer or freezing cold in winter. Edit 3. It has been brought to my attention repeatedly that a shutter release cord does not have enough power to do that much damage, which leads me to believe that one of the commenters who suggested it may have been an issue with the flash setup in the studio is probably right. That I was just completing the circuit. All I know was that it hurt like a bitch, and that it stopped happening after the cord was replaced. Now it seems likely that it just stopped happening because I was then no longer in contact with another good conductor like metal. The malicious compliance was brilliantly executed. Taking back personal items while leaving the studio scrambling highlighted employers' over-reliance on an underappreciated employee. It was the perfect blend of fairness and irony, ensuring the employer felt the weight of his poor management. Story from Noodle013. The Long Game. I've named this tale The Long Game since it actually spans over the course of several years, leading to the satisfying conclusion. Also, because it's a long story. I'll understand if you skip this one for a shorter one. Several years ago, I was in desperate need of a job. I was recently released from active duty in the US Army under a medical discharge, met my girlfriend, who is currently my wife, who moved in with me with her two small children from a previous marriage, and I was bouncing around from dead-end job to dead-end job. I had very little real-world skills to offer to employers, so my options were limited. I took a chance and interviewed with a small security company and was immediately hired. They liked that I was prior service, grilled me with questions only a veteran would know, and sent me to work on their biggest contract. I was on a site of a massive multi-million-dollar construction location. A large-named oil company was building a new headquarters and, well, massive construction project just doesn't seem like a big enough description. As security, a bulk of our responsibility was checking and vetting all construction workers and contractors through the gate, inspect vehicles for possible stolen property, and generally serve as a deterring force. To put it simply, every day my gate alone would process about 1,000 to 2,000 cars during my 8-hour shift. The site was running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to meet the very tight construction schedule. I was only on one of 3 gates, so that's about 3,000 to 6,000 cars that came on site every day in an 8-hour period. Massive construction site. As a side note that will become very important later in the story, each car that came through had to undergo a strict inspection when the driver is first assigned to work on the site. Then the vehicle gets a sticker and is allowed to drive onto the construction site. We would ensure the car has the sticker and then just process everyone's badge through a verification machine. If all badges passed and the car had a sticker, then we would let the contractors on site so they can get to work. Working there was great. All the security was ex-military, so beyond a little teasing about who they served with, everyone bonded really well. We didn't have sick days or vacations days, so when people would call off for personal reasons or illness, everyone happily chipped in to make up the lost hours. And because of this teamwork, our big boss overlooked the call-offs and let us make overtime money. No write-ups, no punishments. Sometimes we were working 16-hour shifts back to back. I spent many nights sleeping in the parking garage in between shifts because it was easier than driving home, to sleep a few hours, only to come back to work for another 16-hour day. We were in outdoor conditions in all weather, and were on our feet on concrete the entire time. Sitting down was a luxury that we rarely saw. We couldn't leave the gate for any reason, unless we were relieved by a supervisor who would try to come by twice during an 8-hour shift to let you go to the porta potty or quickly eat your lunch. Rain, harsh summer heat, bug storms, yes, that's a thing, hail, you were out by your gate with no protection other than a construction hard hat. I know these sound like horrendous conditions, but really, it was the best job I ever had. Because of the conditions, it was no wonder that 95% of the employees were male. We tried hiring females, but most would last a few days before quitting. Those people who did not quit in a few days were lifers and loved the job. The problems began about 3 months into the job. One of the supervisors was quitting to go back to school, so a position opened up. Everyone was given an opportunity to apply for the supervisor position. I was encouraged by the night shift supervisor, who was the one quitting, to go for the promotion because he thought I would be a good replacement for him, even though I was the newest officer on the site and had the least amount of experience, so I threw in my hat just for laughs. 2 other people applied. One was a guy who had obvious seniority, the other was a girl, one of 3 on the site, who had been there for about a year. We were given a face-to-face interview with the boss. We'll call him Jim. My interview went well, and Jim liked that I was ambitious. Jim was also the guy who accepted me onto the site in the first place. The next phase of testing was a practice run as a temporary supervisor. We were each given a day to be the supervisor in charge. Jim was there, along with a junior supervisor named Ray. Yeah, that's a good name for him. For clarification, Ray did not want the promotion and was happy performing his regular duties. Both were present just in case situations occurred that was beyond our ability to handle. They were standing by to assist. My test day went well. I finished all tasks assigned to me, and I even managed to handle a minor emergency on my own. The other two applicants apparently didn't do too well. The senior guy kept forgetting his list of tasks he was given to accomplish and kept going back to the office to ask Jim what he should do next. The girl did okay, but every time she would check up on the guards, she would flaunt around her temporary rank, make employees call her ma'am, and bragging about how she was definitely going to be getting the promotion. Imagine her shock when I was given the position as the new night shift supervisor. To say she was angry was an understatement. Apparently, she was so upset that she didn't get the promotion that she called me on my personal cell phone. She stole my number from the supervisor emergency phone. To add to the situation, I had not yet been informed I got the promotion. Nothing official had been put out just yet. Not a direct quote, but paraphrasing as best as I can. Me. Hello? Girl. How does it feel? Me. Who's this? Girl. What? You don't know? I thought supervisors are supposed to know everything. Me. Very confused. You called OP? I think you may have the wrong number. Girl. I know who I called. Don't pretend like you don't know. You got the promotion because you're all pigs. Me? I got the promotion? Cool. Girl. That promotion was supposed to be mine, but I guess since I'm not in the bro club, they just gave it to you. If you don't resign the position to me, I'm going to tell HR about all this and you'll all be fired. Me. What's I got the position by passing the tests. Isn't it to assume you should get the promotion only because you happen to be born a female? Isn't that act alone sexist? Girl. But only men get promoted to leadership positions. Me. 95% of the site is male. Odds are males are going to get promoted. Sorry you didn't make the cut, but none of this is my problem. So I hung up the phone and called both Jim and Ray to inform them about the call. I was assured that I was promoted. They didn't know how she found out, and they were going to file harassment on my behalf to HR for her stealing my phone number from the work phone and contacting me with threats. And that's where the story should end. But oh no, fellow readers, it has only just begun. Now would be a good time to get some popcorn and a drink. So about 2 to 3 months roll by, and I'm getting into the role of supervisor. Girl has since been removed from the site, and the employees are really happy that I'm the new supervisor and that girl's gone. Things continue as normal, and I begin bonding with my staff. I especially bond with a guard that no one liked. His name for this story is Victor. Victor is a Marine veteran. He was in the initial invasion of Iraq and developed severe PTSD. It makes him very confrontational, argumentative, and a super big a-hole to anyone who talks to him. I liked the guy from the get-go, and we quickly became close friends. Every night I would hang out with him between my duties, and we would talk. I eventually convinced him to seek help from the Veterans Association and go to PTSD counseling. He was also going to school to get his master's degree. Thanks to Ray, who convinced him to not give up on his education, and would just need to vent sometimes. I was that vent. He would blow up at me, yell and scream, and when he was done, we would hug it out. It was therapy for him, and I didn't mind. All seemed to be going well until one day I came to visit with Victor. What I didn't know was that Victor was pulling a 16-hour shift and actually worked the afternoon and the night shift. So when I showed up to work, he had already been there a majority of the day. He asked me if I spoke with Jim recently. I hadn't. Apparently, Jim didn't show up to work today. A few days go by and, well, Jim mysteriously disappeared. After 3 or 4 days of his disappearance, Ray called an emergency meeting with the supervisors. In attendance was myself, Ray, and another supervisor from the second shift who is not important and does not require a fictional name. The meeting was to try and figure out what happened to Jim. We pulled our knowledge together and decided the best course of action was to contact the main headquarters branch to see if they knew something. He wasn't answering the phone when we called him, so we feared he was in the hospital and no one bothered to tell us. When we called, we were given the runaround. But eventually, an HR rep who was friends with Ray spilled the beans. Jim had quit the job. Girl, from earlier, apparently made good on her threats. After she was kicked out of the site, she got a hold of a lawyer and began the process of suing the company. Not only for sexism and favoritism, but also harassment. As it turned out, Jim was a lonely man. Girl and Jim began flirting and eventually sexting. And the idiot used the company supervisor's cell phone to do it. She not only had copies of the messages, but when the company dug into the phone records, they had all the evidence needed to see she was not lying. There were pictures, lots of pictures. Girl was brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. She knew that the old supervisor was going to go back to school eventually, so she began flirting with Jim. She pursued him. Each conversation in person, she would be flirtatious, rubbing him and even having sex with him. On the phone, however, she played coy and made him take charge. In the end, the evidence looked like he pressured her to have sex with him and promised a promotion. In a bout of pillow talk, and before anyone knew that the position was going to be open, to her in exchange for sex acts. At the time it was role play, but now it appears like this was all part of her insurance plan to get promoted for real. That was more than enough for the company to do something. When Jim caught wind what was happening, he took off. This left us without a boss. And worse, in order to avoid a lawsuit, the company rehired Girl to her old position, replanted her on our site, paid her enough money to cover her missed salary, plus a bonus and a raise, and promised to get more females on the site and on supervisor positions. This was enough to satisfy Girl, so she dropped the lawsuit. As the only form of authority on the site, we 3 supervisors took it upon ourselves to run the site as best as we could until a new boss was assigned to help us, or one of us was promoted to the position. Almost 2 months went by, and Girl was a huge nuisance. She was constantly calling off her shift at the last minute, and since everyone didn't like her, no one was willing to cover her shift. We attempted to write her up for the situation, but she quickly threw it back in our face and threatened to call her lawyer for harassment. After all, none of the male employees get written up when they call off. Obviously, this is sexism and boys' club all over again. She pushed her luck too far one day, however, and severely disrespected one of the oil company representatives during his visit. He had her permanently removed from the site. When the security company tried to take her side, for fear of another lawsuit, he said either Girl is gone or he'll get another security company to take over the contract. The company gave in and moved her to another site. But even though Girl was now out of our lives forever, the absolute nightmare she started was still forming overhead. The company finally found a suitable replacement for Jim that was also female to satiate the terms set forth by Girl's lawyer. Our new boss was named, well, I have lots of names for that sea hag, but for now, I'll refer to her as Tasha. Tasha was a handful from the get-go. As the new boss, she was working on the site for nearly 2 weeks before she ever introduced herself to either the second shift supervisor or myself. I still worked nights. What boss does that? 2 weeks before you introduce yourself to the supervisors? It took her another month to eventually meet all the guards. The site was busy, but it wasn't that big. Already she was off to a bad start. She was also non-military and didn't seem respect the fact that every guard and supervisor was a military vet. Most of us served in war zones, lived in the dirt, and were very self-sufficient. She saw everyone as a brainless meathead who needed constant supervision. The term micromanager isn't strong enough of a description to understand the level of hands-on she needed to have. And it probably would have been much different if she was improving things or making things more efficient, but she was barely able to perform the simplest tasks, made constant poor decisions, and just kind of ticked everyone off whenever she was around. We 3 supervisors tried to train her and bring her up to speed with the site, but she wouldn't hear any of our advice. After about another week or so from her introduction to everyone, she began to get worse. We started seeing a ton of write-ups flooding across our desks, like dozens and dozens for a single employee. And the write-ups, while technically correct, were of the pettiest things imaginable. Her favorite was writing up employees for breaking uniform regulations. You have a stray string on your uniform? Write up. Shoes dirty? Write up. A haircut she didn't like? Write up. Glasses smudged? Write up. The best was her writing up a guard because his uniform was wet, because it was raining outside, and we were not allowed to seek shelter because of our duties. Every gate had a guard shack available. It was a small space with just enough room for a chair and a table to write on. It had a small AC and a mini fridge to keep water, Gatorades, and our lunch cold. But no one could use the guard shacks because they were so far away from the gates. Still within eyesight, but we had to physically badge in vehicles and employees, and the verification machine was set up next to the gate. When you swipe a badge, a green or red light flashes, and it makes a little beep sound to say whether or not someone is allowed on property. But if you're in the guard shack, you can't physically hear the beep. Reminder, this is a construction site. Nor can you see the lights because the lights face the vehicle. So you have to stand there and swipe the badge and physically look at the lights to know whether or not to let anyone in. Also, remember the car stickers? They were positioned on the windshield so you can't see them from a shack 30 feet away from the gate. And because of the massive volume of cars coming and going, there just wasn't any time to walk to the guard shack, much less sit down. We tried to explain that to Tasha, who just didn't seem to care. It also became very clear that she was focusing on one guard at a time. Every write-up and disciplinary meeting was laser-focused on one individual. Eventually, that person would get so sick of the harassment that they would quit. As soon as they were gone, she would focus on another guard. The entire site went from a dream job to the most hostile work environment I've ever bore witness to. I served 10 years in the army and served 3 tours to Afghanistan. I served under some of the most idiotic leadership imaginable. People who only got promoted because they were in the army so long that eventually they would get promotions. Ask a veteran, they'll understand what I mean. And all that time, all those dead-end jobs with king of the tiny pond managers I used to work for were nothing in comparison to Tasha. After 2 months under her reign, 12 employees quit, including Ray. Yes, apparently supervisors were also under fire. I feel that I'm obligated at this point to mention that Ray is the best damn leader I've ever had the luxury of working with. Even though he was technically under me, he was and is the most professional man I have ever known. Period. Everyone on site respected him. Everyone would have followed him to hell and back. Everyone loved Ray. Even when I was promoted above him, instead of being petty, he encouraged me to do better. He trained me and became a role model to myself and many others on the site, including Victor. Remember him from earlier? The PTSD guy that no one liked. Apparently he had 2 friends in this world, me and Ray. And now, Ray was bullied out of his job. Portis, never fuck with a Marine, especially one who has nothing left to lose. To put into context how bad this really is, no one quit the company before Tasha took over. Some people left to better opportunities, or were new hires who couldn't hack it. But overall, people had worked on that site since construction began 5 years prior. Some people had been with the company going on 10 years. These were the people she was going after, and who she forced to quit. I had quit smoking for 3 years, and things got so bad, everyone started smoking again, even myself. You would think with as many people quitting that we would have a worker shortage, but then you would be mistaken. As soon as someone quit, the next day the position was filled again. But second shift supervisor and myself quickly learned that these people were not ex-military. These people were moody, had very bad attitudes with other guards, and the many contractors we were dealing with on a daily basis. They were lazy, would often hide in the guard shacks, and would not verify whether or not cars could enter the site. They were messy, both in personality and their surroundings, and generally what one would consider horrible employees. We called Ray to see if he could contact his HR buddy to find out where these people were coming from, and here is where the story gets even worse. Remember when old boss Jim took off? Well, someone had to take the fall for the lawsuit that was forming. So the company terminated another employee. That employee was responsible for staffing the oil company contract. He was also responsible for hiring veterans and verifying them. Remember the questions I was asked at the beginning of this story that only a veteran would know the answers to? Yep, that guy, he was gone. So unfortunately, no more veterans were selected from the hiring pool and sent our way. He was terminated because he originally hired Jim. As it turned out, Tasha, the new terror boss, was actually in charge of an office building contract in another part of the city. She lost the contract to that building, and herself and all her guards were now in limbo and out of a job. Some of the guards were issued to new contracts, but pay and security is usually pretty lousy. Normally about minimum wage. But our job paid very well. $15 an hour to start off because the company was supposed to offer it only to ex-military guards due to the site contract. I discovered years later that Tasha actually lost the building contract, not because the contract ended naturally, but because she and her guards were useless, that the building hired other people to do their jobs. The person in charge of contracts was sleeping with Tasha. They covered up the contract loss so she can still have a job. Oh, and since military guy got fired during the lawsuit, Tasha's buddy took over his responsibilities. Hence, Tasha got another site contract, a pay raise, and was selected only because she was female and sleeping with the contract guy. How's that for ironism? And it gets better. And the write-ups and harassment on our site were a ruse to get the veterans to quit their jobs, forcing the company to fill the spot with whoever was available due to a loophole clause in the oil company contract. It basically allowed the security company to staff open positions with non-military employees in an emergency employee shortage incident. And guess who the new lazy employees were? Yep, the old guards that served under Tasha, who were so bad at their job that they lost their own contract. But why them? Because they were requested, by name, by the largest contract supervisor, Tasha. One by one, I watched my fellow veterans and employees fall under attack and quit, only to be replaced by useless people and backstabbing thugs. I really could go on. There is a ton that happened during that time period, but it's well past the time for some malicious compliance. I was the next to be targeted, and I was the next to quit. The malicious compliance, unfortunately, was not caused by myself initially, but by Victor, who now watched his second and only friend quit from the job site. Victor is my goddamn hero. After I left, I started working for another security company. Ironically, the guy who hired me was Jim. My direct supervisor, Ray. We three were back together again and worked for another oil gas company. The pay was awesome, and info was shared about Jim getting set up for the fall and whatnot. We tried to get Victor to quit his job and join us at the new company. But the old Marine was on one last mission. Remember those car stickers? Well, as it turned out, Victor had a superpower. For whatever reason, he was able to spot forged stickers from across the gate. Okay, so forged stickers. Yep, they were a problem. The construction site had very limited parking and safety regulations were put in place that only licensed drivers could come on site. The cars also had to pass crazy tests in order to meet the safety regulation compliance. The problem is that construction companies and subcontractors often hire illegal workers, or people with criminal history, or people who just have crazy cars that probably aren't registered or even inspected by the state. No one really cared, but without licensing, they could not drive on site. So, someone began forging car stickers and selling them to all the people who would not legally be able to get them. At first, they were crude, obviously crayon on tape. If you glanced at it, it was passable, but any close inspection would reveal that the sticker was fake. If a fake sticker was found, regulations stated that the car must be pulled over, and a security supervisor would need to be contacted. The security supervisor would have to get a hold of the site foreman, a supervisor from the fake sticker driver, and a police officer who would remove the sticker and permanently remove the employee from the site forever. Now, because all the replacement guards were really bad at their jobs, the fake sticker business was in full swing. They were getting better, laser printed on vinyl, and nearly indistinguishable from the real stickers. But Victor was now on a mission. He took a position at the main entry gate and began pulling over as many cars as he could with the fake stickers. He pulled over so many that a security supervisor, Tasha, was assigned to be nearby at all times. The site had to hire an additional police officer, and the site foreman had a permanent representative at the gate. Every day Victor was pulling over car after car. He started training some of the least useless guards how to do it and what to look for. It became a huge nuisance for Tasha, but she technically couldn't do anything about it because he was following the site rules to the letter. After a month of aggressive crackdown on the fake sticker problem, the oil company representatives held a special meeting with Tasha and Victor to plead with him to stop. He had single-handedly removed so many construction workers and contractors that many companies were pulling their long-term contracts with the oil company. Construction came to a sudden halt, and the oil company was hemorrhaging tons of money to either keep on contractors or find new ones willing to pick up the job where others left off. Best of all, the construction should have been way ahead of schedule, so the oil company sold their old headquarters to someone else in the expectation to move into the newly constructed headquarters. However, incompetent security replacements were not checking vehicles exiting the property, and thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of tools and construction supplies were stolen, causing massive setbacks. Then, the sticker fiasco causes any progress that was still going on to come to a sudden halt. The oil company now had to pay and greatly inflated rent at their old headquarters because the building was sold, but they had nowhere to send the employees. So the new owners let them stay and jacked up the rent so high that it was causing the oil company to lose massive revenue and stocks were beginning to drop. During the meeting, Victor only asked one question. So, are you changing the regulation to state that illegal drivers are now allowed on site? Of course, they didn't change it. They couldn't, and Victor knew it. The meeting came to a close. Victor returned to his gate and continued his mission. After a few days, an accident occurred on site. The blame was the drivers, but the buck was passed to Victor, who became the fall guy, and he was terminated from the security company. Everyone knew it was bull, and that he was obviously the scapegoat. But Victor didn't care. He waged his war, and in my eyes, he won. So that's the end of the malicious compliance, and if you made it this far, then good on you. I hope you enjoyed this slice of my life, and I leave you with a wish. I hope the best of your past is worst of your future. If you're still here, then you'll be pleased to know there is a little justice in the world. Victor left security permanently. He finished school with honors and got his master's degree. He also took my advice and sought help for his PTSD. He ended up getting 90% disability from the VA and gets a fat check every month. He technically does not have to work anymore, but took a job as a maintenance supervisor at the local city college. He is doing much better mentally and is looking forward to buying his second home. We still talk regularly and is considered a very close friend of mine. Jim, Ray and I worked together for years at another security company. Jim left that company for better pay at a different security company and has only spoken to me once since his departure. From what I hear, he got married and is doing well. Ray took over as a contract manager for an even different security company, much closer to his residence. He is still happily married and adopted his 2 nephews to raise alongside of his son. We still talk semi-regularly and go drinking at least once a year with Victor. I became a big-time security supervisor at the company and have only recently left due to political conflict. I now am an HVAC technician, and me and the wife are doing well. And what of Tasha? Well, she was eventually fired for the hell she caused. It took years to unravel the drama, but eventually karma caught up to her. Jim called me once, after he left to work somewhere else, and warned me that Tasha was looking for a job in a new security company. He just denied her application when he realized who she was based on the stories Ray and I told him. She then interviewed for the position at my company. Guess who did all employee hiring? This guy. I had another officer send her into my office. She walked in all dressed up, smiling, and ready to do her interview. Then she saw me. Her smile faded and she walked out without ever saying anything. I then made a call to Ray and gave him a heads up that she was out there. Several weeks go by and she walked in to interview with Ray. He told me that when she saw him, she broke down crying. She confessed that since she was terminated, she's been unable to find a job. Everyone who interviews her just so happens to be an ex-military veteran who used to work on an oil company construction site. She was losing her home, her husband left her, and took her kids. He found out about the contract guy she was sleeping with. She was living out of her car. She pleaded him for a job, and Ray, the most professional man I had ever met, was an ex-Marine. He knew what happened to Victor, about how she threw him under a bus. He told her to beat sand and to tell Satan hi for him when she goes to hell. Pro tip: never mess with a Marine. Edit for added info and concerns. Firstly, thank you all for the overwhelming response. I figured my story would be overlooked and possibly read by a handful of people. I never would have imagined I would get this kind of response. Thank you all for the awards, the upvoters, and the kind words. It really means a lot to me, and yes, I read them all. Wish I could respond to everyone, but I can only say thank you so many times before it loses its sincerity. But thank you to everyone. Also, I will pass on your good wishes to Ray and Victor the next time I talk to them. Secondly, few commentators correctly noted that this story is very one-sided and against the female employees. I'm just popping this here to address their concern on a few points. The female character named Girl should have a real name and not just labeled as a gender. You're right, didn't even think about it while I was writing this, and frankly, I don't care enough about her to justify giving her an identification. If this upsets you, then I understand and accept your criticism without any negativity on my end. This is a boys' club. All females in the story are depicted as evil or were oppressed, ect. The story most certainly had that vibe, and really, that wasn't my intention. Consider it a big oversight on my part. The whole story is incredibly long, and there were so many people involved that if I got detailed, it would be like a Marvel movie. In fact, the persons Girl and Tasha were the only females on the site that were a problem and were not liked. We had other female officers on site that were well respected and were treated just as equally as everyone else. One female in particular tried to be a huge help to us, and she was one of the replacements. She was an ex-police officer from Chicago who helped us legally build a case of workplace harassment and even coached us on how to lead the investigation. The case was ignored and nothing productive came of it. It's a story all on its own, so I excluded it due to length. Jim was not a victim. You are correct. What he did is idiotic and an abuse of power. I will not argue with you there. However, note that I don't talk to Jim anymore. There are reasons for that, and the fact that his loins caused numerous people grief and sorrow is a big factor. What he did was reprehensible. However, Girl using the sexual relationship to push her own agenda also negates her being able to claim victimhood. If she was a victim, she should have sued instead of going right back to a company that allowed this to happen. At least, that's my opinion, which really means nothing. If this story offends you, then too bad. Hate to be the jerk, but I can't change events that happened in real life to suit your political correctness. Things happened, and as the world crumbles around you, sometimes the moral compass gets spun. It's not an excuse, just a very sad fact of life that is highlighted when you are trying to claw your way out of a shitty situation. Either way, thank you for everything, and I'm greatly humbled by you all. It was sweet revenge rather than a malicious compliance story. The revenge was perfect and executed flawlessly. The toxicity of the supervisor finally led to the company that had hired him. The best part is the security guards stood for them and struck a heavy blow the company and the supervisor. Story from serious-_face. Putting a smile from A to Z. Gear yourself up, as this is a long one. All your punctuation and spelling experts take their day off, as this is a story about a delivery driver, myself, not a job that requires an ology in the mechanics of the English language. At the start of COVID in UK, where all good stories start, I had myself an easy job working in a casino. Once lockdown started, we were all put on furlough for 6 months. I finally had all that free time that I said I had needed to do all the things I have never had the time to do. Like many people, having time is not the same as having motivation. And all I did in that 6 months was become very good at Call of Duty, drinking beer, and putting on weight. After the first lockdown was lifted, we returned to work with many changes, and most of them just made the job a drudge, and I started to hate it. When we were told that we would be going into lockdown again, I had to make a choice for my own sanity and my waistline, that I would leave this job and do something so I could be working. Sounds crazy now that I would choose work over free money for doing nothing, but that is what I did. There is also a story in this, but that's for another Reddit. The new job. I looked on Facebook, it was lockdown, and it was easy. See above, lacks motivation. I found recurring adverts for work with one of the world's largest online shops. We will call them amazing, not amazing. And this was in the last mile part of the service as a delivery associate, delivery driver. The money was good, and you would be driving a branded van, all fuel paid, easy job on the face of it. In September, I contact them and get called in to do a tux test. While I'm here, I get the info on the situation. I'm not actually working for Amazing, not amazing, but I'm working for a delivery service partner, DSP. In fact, I'm not really working for them, as I'm a self-employed contractor. In essence, I was to be paid £100 a day, and if we got good delivery numbers for a week, we would get a bonus at one of 3 levels on all the days I worked. It's a standard thing with Amazing and the branded vans. Having heard some horror stories of how the non-branded drivers are treated and fleeced by the DSP that they work for, Amazing, not amazing, knows what's going on and don't care. This seemed a good deal. No in-van training was given due to COVID, but I've driven big vans and trucks and all sorts, so not a problem for me. Scary to think though, they give no training and let people loose on the roads in these vans, and it's not changed much without the COVID restrictions. Amazing, not amazing, seem to not worry about this. The work takes a bit of getting used to, and it's hard work to start with and in all weather conditions. The routes are all pre-caged, so you collect your parcels and you get a device that tells you where to go. Route times are 8 hours, and the little Amazing computer programs the route. You have 1 hour extra for retries. When you first start out, even after 9 hours, you'll have been behind, and some poor soul who finished their route early will come and rescue you. More on this later. If you go over the 9-hour mark, your DSP gets a fine from Amazing, not amazing. By the time December rolls around, the DSP that I'm working for has taken on loads of extra drivers and more branded vans, even taken on 20 non-branded vans with promises from Amazing for continued work over the festive season and into the next year. Not even half the non-branded vans got used. I've become very efficient at looking at my route in the morning and changing it around. My 8-hour route can be completed in 4 to 5 hours, and in December we started work at 6 a.m, so I was the one doing the rescues. Or if everyone was up to date, I would be home by midday. It was really that easy, although them bonuses never seemed to kick in. Amazing, not amazing, never had a problem with it. And I was working weekends when they had a real problem getting people to work them days, and to many people dropping shifts. Roll into January, and suddenly Amazing, not amazing, tells my DSP, we can't give you all that work we promised, so you are going to have to let a load of your drivers go. End of January, I get home and my partner throws a pregnancy test at me and said, I'm not getting fat, I'm pregnant. Then bursts into tears. Turns out she was 5 months pregnant, neither of us are young, and she just thought it was menopause. Not the ideal time with work laying off drivers, but I had laid good groundwork to being a good driver, never sick, always working weekends and helping out when needed, even picking up dropped shifts. I had to drop a shift a week so the DSP could keep as many drivers as possible, just in case Amazing, not amazing, actually gave them more work. I was fine with that, and the 4-day week means more time with the baby mama, watching her belly grow with the baby due in May. By the end of April, I'm doing 5-day weeks again. And now COVID restrictions are loosening up a bit more, and the DSP I work for are trading new drivers and getting them to go out a couple of times with experienced drivers to show them the ropes, and I get to be doing that a lot. It's a great skive as it's half routes, and even with someone that's slow, it's 4 hours max. I tell them I'm going to be off for a bit from mid-May, and I'll let them know when I'm coming back. I don't get holiday pay or paternity leave, but my bank balance is okay, and damn, I'm about to be a dad. I take off till early July. It's great being home with the baby and her mum. She is awesome. Her mum is awesome and life is good. But I've made the decision that I need to be doing something else, as this job has very limited prospects. I start on a course that'll take about a year, and I can do it around working for amazing, not amazing. I go back to work, and it kind of runs the same as the year before, but I get to train new drivers. And again, as Christmas comes, the DSP takes on loads of new drivers and a load more vans. As amazing, not amazing, has promised them more work even after the Christmas peak. I shit you not, they hired 10 non-branded vans and I only ever saw 2 go out on routes. I say nothing and just crack on head down, only working 4 days, 2 of which are weekends, as I need to study and help out with the baby. Come January and all that work, amazing, not amazing, had promised the DSP was no place to be seen, and it was time to get rid of excess drivers. Again, I'm in a good position as I complete my routes and help when needed. Also work Saturday and Sunday. I need a minimum of 4 days a week to cover my lavish lifestyle, pay my bills, support my family. Already spoke with the boss and told him this, and was assured that because of my rank, top 5 driver, it was of little importance to me until this. In the DSP, I'd be fine. Here comes the malicious compliance. Sorry it took so long. Come February, I check the rota, and I've only got 3 days while other people get 5 days. And they don't do weekends yet, I do. Not one to be messed around. I contact the boss and explain my frustration at my lack of work, and tell them that going forward, I won't be working weekends unless I get 4 shifts. The following week, we are told that if you want more than 3 shifts a week, you need to work at least 1 weekend shift. Following week, I'm on 3 shifts again, and including Sunday and Saturday, the week runs Sunday to Saturday, I go in on Sunday, speak to the boss, and he says nothing he can do about it now. I tell him, you best get someone to cover that Saturday then, as I won't be doing it. Come Saturday, my phone gets lit up, and I just ignore it. I put in my request for the next week, Monday to Wednesday, no weekends, and 3 days only. Had a nice late sleep on Sunday, removed my DSP boss's number from my favorites so it couldn't get past my silent mode on my phone. And sure enough, I had about 10 missed calls and a few messages asking me to cover dropped routes. On Monday, I was back in, did my route, took about 5 hours, and the rest of the week went like that. Come the weekend, I'd get missed calls and messages as they were desperate for weekend drivers. Not much they could do as I was only doing 3 days a week now and not working weekends. Come March and all of a sudden, amazing, not amazing. Tell the DSP that your drivers are finishing their routes too quick. Tell them to slow down. I get told this and I'm like, hold on, we get paid the same money to do the same job, but you want us to do it slower. By this time, I've had enough and I'm ready to quit anyway. And I've got myself something else lined up that I'd been working on, so I went out on that day and bashed my route out in just over 3.5 hours. Admittedly, my boss was not happy, but I no longer had any respect for him, so it didn't bother me. Next day, I'm 30 drops ahead and get the message that I need to slow down or I won't be on the rota next week, so I Zoom call my dad and we chat for an hour. I actually take a lunch break, the first one I'd ever had as a delivery driver, managed to push it to 7 hours, and still, I got berated in the team WhatsApp group. So I thought, sod this. I came in the next day with some textbooks and put my device in airplane mode. When I got 30 ahead, I stopped, did some reading, got myself 30 behind chilled, even had a nap one time after the baby had a bad night. I did this for a few weeks. My days were longer, but I was getting my study done and my course was nearly done. I had set up an interview with a company that would give me a job, and obviously I did it over a Zoom call from the back of my delivery van. I overrun on my route that day by 15 minutes, which is a big no, but hey, I got the job, so wasn't too bothered. I needed to continue working for 4 more weeks, but I was going to do it at a snail pace, a snail with a limp. I maxed out my drive time every day. They stopped sending people to rescue me as I just slowed down even more. I went from top rank to lowest and still no sign caring about it. I jacked it in a week early as I no longer had the will or the need to do it. I will say this about that job. I met some great people and made some good friends. I experienced people from other countries and cultures, and we had a laugh when it was good. But the staff turnover is unbelievable, and how that company treats people like expendable objects has really darkened my view of them. Now, I'm sorry if I bored you with this, but it amused me at the time, and I thought I'd share. The malicious compliance was perfectly executed, and it was strategic, calculated, and satisfying. By slowing down and embracing the inefficiency, OP made a clear point without sacrificing personal goals.